Welcome to Easily Entertained. My name is Bryson Olson, and here we talk about all things entertainment, specifically, usually, the good aspects. I'm a big fan of indie animation, and I feel like the indie animation scene has been going fantastic the last couple years. And one of those indie animation projects that I've really been liking is one that's available for free right now that you could go and watch on this very platform, YouTube. And as you have read the title, it's the Amazing Digital Circus. So much fun, very good. Has not necessarily similar vibes, but kind of trying to strike a similar audience to like Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, who also got their starts here on YouTube. They recently just had their 6th episode drop this last week, so got to talk about it. So let's dive in.
How do I take this headset off?
Just keep grabbing at it. That works for all of us.
So one of the best parts about the whole show of the Amazing Digital Circus has to be kind of like the story that's behind it. And every episode is kind of just like some wacky little adventure, but the overarching story is that the main characters, aside from Kane, the ringmaster, they are all prisoners in this virtual world. They had put on a headset at one point, and basically their bodies got trapped, and their minds got trapped, and now they're in this digital world. And we have a cast of 6 characters at the moment. There have been more characters in the past, but yeah, so kind of going down the line, you have Ragatha, you have Jax, you have Kinger, Gangle, Pomni, and Zubul, who are all just their own little manifestations of little interesting kind of cartoon characters, like a ragdoll, a chess piece, amalgamation of a bunch of different parts, ribbons, and a clown mask. Not a clown mask like the drama masks, and a whole little bunch of different things. And then of course there's Kane, who is just like a weirdo. He's the AI who's in charge of everything. He's the one who establishes all the rules of the world and creates the little adventures that they have to go on that he hopes they like, but they never really do. But it's super fascinating that the concept is just that they're all trapped in here, and they kind of just have to deal with whatever torment they have kind of been given. And there are lots of fan theories and stuff on like if Kane is the mastermind behind everything. Is he a part of a bigger picture? Is there another person that actually like created the digital world or the digital circus or whatever? So there's a whole bunch of different things, but kind of relating to that, in researching a little bit about this, I had learned that the people that make the Amazing Digital Circus, Glitch Productions, and I believe it's written and directed by, I think his name is Gooseworks, but they took a lot of inspiration from one of my favorite short stories, honestly, that's very intriguing, and that is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And you can kind of see a lot of the similarities, at least me personally, if you've read or heard any of the I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream type content around there. In that world, Am, or Allied Master Computer, he's a vast intelligence, like supercomputer who gains sentience, and he imprisons the last 5 humans after he kills the rest of humanity and tortures them for over 100 years because he hates them for bringing him to life, puts them through his like little virtual games, and just keeps them in endless torment. And it almost feels like there are some elements of that in the show, and they did take a lot of inspiration from that. And Kane could potentially be Am, or it could have been someone else, but there were a lot of things, like especially in this last episode, that they kind of relate to that little short story and just to other little tidbits of computer type culture. For example, this last episode, they all have guns now. They go to Zubul's room and they taunt her with a song called Daisy Bell. And that is the first song that a computer sung. Like the song existed prior, but the first song a computer ever saying was an IBM something. I can't remember the exact thing, but it had a nickname, ENIAC, ENIAC, which backwards is Cain. So it's like a little tidbit, and like it could be just a throwaway little bit of information, but it could actually be pretty significant. You know, we'll have to wait for some more episodes to really figure it out. But it's this idea of entrapping these people inside a virtual world that is very reminiscent of I have no mouth and I must scream. And it just makes you really intrigued when certain little glitches and weird little things happen in this world. You're like, something seems a little fishy. And it's just combined with like the aesthetic that just makes it so fascinating to watch, and we'll talk about that as well.
Oh, forget it. Let's go to an intermission.
Intermission time.
So, on top of the story of the Amazing Digital Circus, kind of another thing that helps elevate it in terms of like thriller or horror, because that's kind of what the show is going for. Like, it's super bright and colorful, but there are also some crazy dark things that are happening in this world, and kind of the way to do that is through the visuals of it, and just like the way it is being animated and told, everything, just the whole aesthetic. And what I love about it is it's very reminiscent of early, I don't know necessarily early, but 90s and early 2000s animation, like when they were getting started with computer generated imagery, where it's kind of surreal, bright, and colorful. There's not a lot of harsh shadows, like of not harsh necessarily, but not a lot of very detailed shadows. Like it is very, like I almost like think of it as like some of the early cartoons like that I grew up watching, like very early on, like kid shows where it was like Roly Poly Oly or something like that. Like those kind of things were just very eerie in their animation style, where like you could tell it was fake, but it wasn't to the point where like a Pixar movie now, you know it's fake, but it like feels comfortable. It was more like the little short prior to the first Toy Story of like the toy and the freaky baby, because those were really disturbing. You know, like it was fake, but it still felt really off. And that's what this show is like taking a lot of inspiration from. Obviously it's a bit more aesthetically pleasing than most of those kind of properties, because obviously technology is just vastly different now, but they tried to take a lot of inspiration from that kind of aesthetic, which I think does really well, because it makes it very recognizable. Because even if not everything is like that, there's something in your brain that has seen something like this before, at least just in terms of aesthetic. And so the fact that you can recognize it a little bit and it's a little bit off just allows it to play almost into that uncanny valley feeling that just makes it even more eerie when it's paired up with the story, you know. And the technological aspects of it are awesome. You know, you get a lot of 2D and 3D elements that combine, and they do it in a way that is just like unnerving, almost like cartoonish, but really almost broken, I would say. Like, obviously all their things are done with intention, but the idea of this digital world that is kind of almost crumbling around them and is designed in order to not capture, but entrap and torment these characters, just makes it feel almost broken. Like they even talk about it in the show of characters abstracting when they kind of lose their minds, that they are never getting out of this digital world, so they abstract. So you get like little glitches in this little world that are both intentional and unintentional, at least it seems. And so that aesthetic just kind of allows it to be even more uncanny valley. Just it makes you feel uncomfortable at times. It's fully engaged when you're watching the show, but it can tend to make you a little bit uncomfortable. It really does feel almost like a horror show, just because it's not thrown in your face. You know, we had one episode that was like a horror episode where they go to a haunted house and they deal with like this freaky demon looking thing, and that bit was pretty freaking terrifying. It does look very scary, but some of the scarier moments in this show are the ones where it is not intentionally making it look scary. It is using the vibe, using the aesthetic that is like I said, recognizable but twisted in a way to really pull you away from your comfort zone and pull the characters away from your comfort zone. And as empathetic humans, we are relating with these characters, and it gets more and more uncomfortable as we start to go through it. The last episode I don't think was as like scary really, but it allowed them to really show a lot of different emotions and like dive deeper into the characters and their turmoil personally that they're each feeling of having to be trapped in this world and be together every single second of every single day. I think it just kind of allows these things all mixed together to make such a delightfully like weird kind of show.
Ragatha's the cheerful one, Gangle's the sad one, Kinger's the crazy one, Zubal's the grumpy one, and you are the one...
The last little bit that I want to talk about is kind of the characters, really, and especially because of this last episode. One of the characters, Jax, he's like the rabbit. He describes in this last episode that everyone is portraying an archetype. Everyone's devolved into an archetype, but we are getting contrast of different characters that don't actually fit the archetype that they were shown to kind of have from the beginning. Because I do think that was the case. They were putting on characters, but now the facade is breaking. You know, the digital world is kind of crumbling and they're seeing more of the real people behind the actual character. And I find that super intriguing because like the whole idea of the digital circus kind of seems to be like a trap. It seems to be like almost a torture chamber. Like they don't put it out like that, but it's basically like, well, you're trapped here, so you're gonna have to just deal with whatever comes your way. And some characters are able to accept that more than others, and some are not. And some, it's not what they seem to put out. You know, it is a character for some of these people. Jax in particular is putting on a character, and yet he feels so much terror from having to connect with people and then they abstract and go away. Or he feels alone and he's like, he wants that connection because deep down all of these characters are human, even if they're like forms that we're seeing are not human forms. They are human deep down. They are human on the outside. So it kind of defies that archetype idea. And I feel like a lot of cartoons try to do archetypes sometimes, and that's not always a bad thing. But in this show, they use it as a way to be like, well, these characters aren't actually like this. And then we got to see in this last episode that they really aren't, because they break off from those archetypes. Kinger is very crazy, but when he gets in the dark, he's very sincere, he's wise, he's caring. He has his thoughts all together and is able to give like pieces of advice that fit really well. You have Ragatha, who on the outside is a very cheerful person, is always trying to make sure everyone feels okay, and it's almost like a people pleaser. But as that, she doesn't ever care about herself. She tends to not like herself because she just wants to make others happy, and so she adapts herself in order to do that. But then she kind of loses sight of her direction. You have Gangle, who is like usually pretty sad because she loses her happy mask, but she has her moments where she can enjoy things. She just doesn't like being tormented by Jax and kind of being used as the butt of the joke. You have Zubal, who's the grumpy one, but is actually pretty caring and can be pretty happy. At times she just doesn't want to put up with the garbage that is this world. I already talked about Jax. You have Pomni, who is she's a mix of everything really, and it's kind of interesting to see her character develop throughout the episodes that we have already, because she has her moments where like she can be pretty funny, but also she can be pretty serious. She can be caring, but she can also be like, I don't really want to do this kind of thing. She kind of just has a whole bunch of different things, which I think is good. I think as her character is kind of like not necessarily the everyman, but is the most normal out of all of them. She's grounded, but that's because she's the newest one, and I think that's a good thing. And then you have Kane, who is just this kind of crazy AI that is like seemingly going mad, like I said, back to the I have no mouth and I must scream type thing. Like he's like Am, where he's kind of losing his mind, just acknowledging that he is not real, and like he's real but not a human. You know, he doesn't have a mind in the same way that they do, and he like not intentionally but kind of torments these guys with all his adventure. It's interesting the way they tell these characters, that they tell the stories of these characters, and I'm excited to see where they go with the show, because it is just one that you have to kind of wait usually a while, because it is an indie project, so not all the episodes are coming out at the same time or coming out even close to the same time sometimes, so you kind of just have to wait. But then when something new comes out, you can be really interested on what is actually happening, and I love that. That's one of the things I love about indie animation, that the aesthetics that they get to experiment with, you know, the stories they get to do. It's so much fun. And I think if you haven't watched it, I don't know how you made it this far in the video, but go watch the Amazing Digital Circus. It's literally all free on YouTube. There are 4 episodes that are on Netflix, because I think they were trying to expand like Viewpoint, but they can't always get them onto Netflix as fast as they can just on YouTube. So go watch it on YouTube. It's a great time, and it's free. You can support them directly, and I think that's great. So those are my thoughts on the Amazing Digital Circus. So let's talk about our rating. If you don't know our Easily Entertained rating scale from least to best, it is garbage, once is fine, right mood, quotable, go to, and all day, every day. And for me personally, I have actually watched every episode like several times. So I would probably say that the Amazing Digital Circus for me right now is an all day, every day. And I can't wait until we get more episodes, because I really do just want to see where the story is going. So yeah, if you have seen the show and you have different thoughts, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe so you can be notified of all new episodes when they release every Tuesday. It's always a good time. And if you have any comments on future projects that you'd like to hear me talk about, whether that's movies or video games or TV shows or whatever, I'd love to have some suggestions. Head down to the comments for that. But that is it for this episode of Easily Entertained. Until next time, bye.